Great. Okay. I guess we'll go ahead and get started then. If you wouldn't mind muting your microphone, that would be great. And I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth Steele, who is our elections director, and she will be taking it from here. You can unmute yourself at any time to ask a question. You don't have to hold your questions until the end. So without further ado, here is Elizabeth. Pretty much everyone who I already told you.
Hi, everybody. I hope you all can hear me. I didn't hear who you all represent, but I understand that it's various of you are going to be out talking to voters, and that the point here, our goal is to give you a little bit of information and background about the elections law so that you know what you might be expecting in terms of questions and how to answer them. So I'm just going to start and talk a little bit about Just Vote Colorado Election Protection. It was established in 2004. It's a coalition that is nonpartisan and that is led by Colorado Common Cause in conjunction with the Colorado Lawyers Committee, Mi Familia Vota, the League of Women Voters, Disability Law Colorado, and our national partners are Election Protection, which is a national group coalition run by the National Lawyers Committee, and they own the 1-866 Vote hotline, and NALEO, which is the National Association of Latino Elected and Appointed Officials, and they provide access to the Ve y Vota hotline in Spanish. So we provide voter assistance, help voters with questions, and try and be sure that every eligible person in Colorado gets to vote and that their vote gets counted accurately. So just so you have a little bit of background in what the election law is, I will start with telling you that it's much easier today than it ever has been to vote in Colorado, much more convenient. We reformed the Colorado Election Code in 2013. We adopted a law called the Colorado Voter Access and Modernized Elections Act. And this will be the first presidential election ever held under the new voting model. The rules for who can vote and how you vote are much simpler, and something I appreciate, having lived with the old model, but something that is actually beneficial as you go out and explain it to your constituents. So sort of the ABCs where we start. We're going to start with who's eligible to register and to vote. You have to be 18 years old by election day. 16-year-olds can pre-register, but at this point, they're probably not your target. 18 by election day, a U.S. citizen, a resident of Colorado for 22 days by election day. It's no longer a requirement that you be in a particular precinct. You just need to be a resident of the state. So even if somebody has moved from Glenwood Springs to Denver in those 22 days, it doesn't matter as long as they've been in Colorado. It's also the case that you have to not be serving a sentence for a felony or be on parole for a felony. So otherwise, anyone who meets these requirements is eligible to vote. And in order to vote, there are several different ways you can vote. If you want to vote online, you can do that. People can do that if they have a Colorado driver's license or a state ID card. And if they have that, when you register to vote, whether it's online or otherwise, you have to present that card or the number. If you don't have that, you can register using the last 4 digits of your social security number. If you don't have any of those things, you can still register to vote. And they will assign an identifying number to you, and they will put you in the system. In that instance, you're likely to be what they call ID deficient. And so when you actually vote, whether it's by mail ballot or otherwise, you're going to have to show some form of ID. The ways to register: if someone has a Colorado driver's license or state ID card, they can register online at govotecolorado.com. If they don't have one of those, they can register using a paper form, which you can get from that same website, or you could get at a clerk's office. And the paper form can be mailed or faxed or emailed to your county clerk. You can go to a county clerk's office in whatever county the person resides in, where they live. Or you can go to, it says here, a VSPC, that means a voter service and polling center, in the county where they live. It says you can register through a voter registration drive. That's unless they do it this weekend, that's not going to be so relevant at this point in time, because all VRDs have to stop doing their drive as of October 17th. So there are several different ways to register that anybody can take advantage of. Once you're registered, what's going to happen is you're going to get a ballot mailed to that person. Every active registered voter in Colorado has a ballot mailed to them. And once they get that ballot, they will have several ways to actually vote and return their ballot. They can return it by mail, put it in a U.S. Postal Service box, take it to a post office. In that case, they should include postage. The amount of postage varies depending upon the county or the election. I would say that almost every county I think it may not be true in Adams County, but almost every other metro area county is going to have a multi-page ballot this time, because the ballot is just so long. There are so many candidates, so many races, so many issues. So the postage will probably be 2 stamps as opposed to just 1. And we would encourage people to, if they're going to mail a ballot, that they mail it no later than November 1st, so that there's time for it to arrive and be received by the county clerk, because postmarks don't count. So ballots have to be received by 7 p.m. on election day. So at some point, it's not a good idea to put it in the mail. So the other option is to put it in a drop box. No postage required. Some of the drop boxes are 24-hour boxes, and those boxes are located in every county. There are some that are standalone locations. Some are at voter service and polling centers, and you can drop your ballot in any county. So if you live in Arapahoe, but you work in Denver and you want to drop your ballot in Denver or vice versa, you can do that. The counties will swap ballots, but they will stamp them as being received if they're there by 7 p.m. on election day, even if it's not in the correct county. So that's a new provision for this election, and a favorable one for voters. There is a restriction that one person cannot return more than 10 ballots. Obviously, each person can only vote once, but in terms of collecting ballots from people and returning them, one person can only return 10 ballots in any single election. So that doesn't mean 10 ballots today and 10 ballots tomorrow, or 10 ballots to this location and 10 ballots to another location. It means total in the whole election, one person can only return 10 ballots. So there's not a huge enforcement mechanism for that, but if you were to violate it, and in any flagrant way, it would become obvious perhaps through video surveillance of drop boxes or something else. The law is each person can only return 10 ballots. So we need to live with that. So to be sure that you get a mail ballot, people who are already registered should be encouraged to be sure their address is correct on their voter registration. especially if they've moved. And they can do that by going to govotecolorado.com and looking up. They would click on Find My Registration. They'll be prompted to enter their last name, their first name, their date of birth, and their zip code. And then it will bring up their registration record. And they will be have the opportunity to see what their mailing address is. And right next to their mailing address is a little, are the words change address or something like that. They can click on that and they would be able to change the address if it's not accurate as it is right now. But the best way to ensure that someone's going to get a mail ballot is to be sure that their address is correct. Ballots are not forwardable. So even though your mail may be forwarded from a prior address, they are not forwardable. Ballots are not forwardable. It will be returned to the county clerk. And that will just create more issues. Not that they can't vote, but then they will definitely need to go to a voter service and polling center to correct their to update their registration. If someone is not already registered, if they register online or if they register in any form, either online or otherwise, by October 31st, which is Halloween, they can get a ballot mailed to them. After October 31st, they need to go to a voter service and polling center to register and to actually receive a ballot. So we have registration after October 31st, all the way up to and including Election Day. But to get a ballot in the mail, you have to have done it by the close of business on October 31st. So some voters that you talk to may say, I don't know if I got my ballot, or I got my ballot, but I made a mistake, or I got my ballot, but I don't know where it is, or something like that. The answer is they can get a replacement ballot. That is not a problem. They do that by going to a voter service and polling center in their county. They need to go, they can't go to another county. They need to go to the county where they're registered. They don't need to bring in their original ballot. Some of them won't have it anyway. Their original ballot will be canceled automatically in the voter registration database. So nobody else will be able to vote that ballot. There are programs to track where your ballot may be, any voter's ballot may be in the process, the preparation process, the mailing, and the receipt back by the county of the voted ballot. There are certain programs that do that. It's called Ballot Trace in Denver County. It's called Ballot Track in Arapahoe County. I know Adams County has a similar program. I don't recall the name of it. A lot of the Jeffco does too, I believe. So you can find those programs where you will get either an email or a text message that says your ballot's waiting to be mailed to you. Your ballot's been prepared. It's waiting to be mailed. Your ballot has been mailed. Your ballot has been received. This is something that's comforting to voters, you'll find as you talk to them, to know that their ballot's been received. If they aren't signed up for any of those programs, you can go to the Secretary of State's website, the same one that you used to find your registration, and so it would be govotecolorado.com. And you can pull up the voter record, and there's a line on the page that comes up that says mail ballot status. And underneath that, it will say, like mine, when I looked at it today, says your ballot will be mailed on October 17. I live in Denver County. Then it will say your ballot was mailed on whatever day they actually get it out. And then when I voted and it's been returned to Denver for processing, it's going to say your mail ballot was received by Denver County on such and such a day, so that people can verify that their ballot was in fact received. This may be something you hear about because there are groups that are going to be encouraging people to vote. They may not have the most updated information. They may reach out to a voter and say, I don't think you've voted yet. And that person may be concerned about Well, I dropped it off, so it should be.
Okay, not coming. Okay.
Does somebody have a question? Okay. So voter service and polling centers are your best friends, and a place that you'll, I think, find useful in terms of helping voters to solve whatever their problem may be, because there really shouldn't be very many unsolvable problems, and people should be able to vote. A lot of that will happen at a voter service and polling center. They are in every county. And at those locations, individuals can register to vote, they can update their registration, they can get a replacement ballot, they can vote on an accessible machine if they're a voter with a disability that needs help with voting. You can drop off a mail ballot, and there will be those people who just want to go to a location and vote in person. It's a tradition for them, perhaps. They're required to be open for this election starting October 24th in every county. The times they're open, the days they're open will vary somewhat. And as we get closer to election day, there will be more locations available. So they are a one-stop shop, an answer to a lot of issues that you may hear about from voters. If you want to vote in person, you can do that at a VSPC. Anybody can vote on an accessible machine, whether or not they're a voter with a disability. This is one where you do need to go to the county where you live in order to vote, because it's only in that county that they can pull up for you a ballot that reflects the races that you're entitled to vote on. The key to remember about in-person voting is that anyone who's voting in person has to show an ID when they go to vote. So this is a list of the various IDs that are acceptable in Colorado. We have a pretty broad list, and it goes everywhere from a driver's license, state-issued ID card, a U.S. passport, a Colorado student ID, an employee ID for a government with a photo, an employee ID with a photo from a government, federal or state government office, military ID with a photo, an FAA pilot's license, Medicare or Medicaid card, a birth certificate has to be a certified copy. A copy
I have a question.
Yeah.
Sorry, this is Shantae with Frisk.
Yeah.
I've just been curious about, do ballots, I've always wondered about this, are ballots available in other languages? Because we have members who are registered, and I'm not necessarily sure they're monolingual. They have some English, but I was just curious to know if ballots are available in another language.
We're going to get to that a little later, but let me answer.
Oh, okay.
That's
sorry.
okay. No, let me answer the question. There are 3 counties in Colorado where it is mandatory that they provide bilingual voting materials, including ballots. The mandate comes through the Voting Rights Act based on the last census that was done, and they have this formula for determining language needs and proficiency in various counties. Those counties that are mandatorily required to provide Spanish, and it can be a number of languages, but in Colorado, the only language that they're mandatorily required to provide a ballot in is Spanish, and the only counties are Denver, Castilla County, and Rio Grande County. Otherwise, they're not required to provide assistance, and I'm not aware that there are any counties who are doing it on a voluntary basis. So what may be most useful is if someone's going to vote in person and needs help with language, they are entitled to bring with them anybody that they want who can help them with the language and the ballot. So it can be a friend, a child, a husband. It doesn't have to be a registered voter. It can be anybody who can help them with the language. So you do have a right to bring language assistance with you. Unfortunately, only 3 counties are required to provide the ballot in Spanish. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
So the list of IDs, going back to that for a second, there's a number of those. There are 2 pages in this presentation. We went through some of the more traditional ones. It's also possible to use a utility bill, a cable or phone bill, a bank statement, government check, paycheck, other government document that shows the name and address of the voter, and it has to be dated within 60 days of voting. So I can't use my water bill or my phone bill from 2015. But I could use one that is dated today if I was voting by November 8th. Also, certificate of degree of Indian or Alaskan Native blood, a tribal ID card, certified document of naturalization, a veteran's ID card, a letter from a group residential facility indicating that the voter is a resident there, or a Division of Youth Corrections ID card issued by the Department of Human Services in Colorado. An out-of-state driver's license does not work. A foreign passport does not work. A student ID card from an out-of-state university does not work. So those are frequently the ones that we get asked about. But if it's a US passport, if it's a student ID from a Colorado university or college, it will work. And obviously a Colorado driver's license will work. So with all the talk going on about people threatening or suspecting that our elections will be hacked, I think it's important just to stop for a second and talk a little bit about what some of the safeguards are that protect the voting model that we're discussing. Every voter has only one live ballot at a time. So when you go and get a replacement ballot, if that's what happens, your other ballot is canceled. So there's not this possibility that someone's going to vote 2 ballots. Once a ballot's been cast and processed and counted, no other ballot will be counted for that same voter. This is sort of a side note to that, but it's important in this particular election because we have such a long ballot and because it's a 2-page in most counties. It's going to be 2 cards and at least 3 sides, if not 4 sides. Voters need to be reminded that they need to return both cards together at the same time. If they return only one card and that card gets counted, then they say, oh my gosh, here's the second card. Can I take that to the county and have them add it to my ballot? The answer is no. So they need to return both cards at the same time in the same envelope. So it's been a while since we've had a 2-card ballot. So I think that would be a good reminder to people that they need to return both cards. If they only returned one, then their votes on whatever card they returned will be counted, but they won't then have the opportunity to vote for whatever was on the card that they didn't return. Signature verification is performed on all the ballots that are returned by mail or dropped off. That means that if a voter says, oh, my son's not here, or my husband's not here, but I know how they want to vote, or my father's not here, can I fill out the ballot for them and sign their name? The answer is no. that is going to be a discrepant signature when it goes through processing at the county level. And they will, a letter will be issued to them about that fact. And ultimately, since someone besides the voter signed it, they will not be able to cure that, and ultimately will be turned over to the DA for investigation. So people can't sign other people's ballots. And it sounds somewhat, people don't believe it, but it is absolutely true that every single signature gets verified. And it's verified against the signature on a driver's license, on a voter registration form, on a state ID card. The statewide voter registration database can have up to 10 or 20 different signatures, different samples of a person's signature. Only sign your own ballot. In terms of the voting machines in Colorado, the voting machines in Colorado create a paper trail. So, and they're what's called, there's an air gap between the machine and the internet. They're not connected to the internet in any way. So this idea that someone can hack a voting machine and change how you vote is not going to be an issue in Colorado. You will get a paper that will show you what vote was recorded. And that paper is how you're going to vote. So I think actually, despite all the talk that we hear, I think that voting is actually pretty well safeguarded in Colorado. And I actually heard a presentation this morning from the Secretary of State's office about some of the things they've been doing to be sure that votes are protected. And I was actually pretty impressed. So I think that we should feel confident about our ability to vote securely in Colorado. Some important dates: October 17th, that's next Monday. That's when counties can begin to mail ballots to registered voters. Some of them will mail on Monday the 17th. Some won't go out till Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or even Friday. They have that whole week to put the ballots in the mail. Some counties do them in batches. They mail some on one day, some on another. It's sort of a dance with the Postal Service to be sure that your ballot gets the best treatment. October 24th, which is then the next Monday, is when the voter service and polling centers open for the first time in all the counties. And then the next Monday is Halloween, October 31st, and that's the last day to register or update your registration and have a ballot mailed to you. It's not the last day to register to vote, but it's the last day to get a ballot in the mail. November 8th, obviously, is Election Day, and that's Tuesday of the next week, and all of the VSPCs are open 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Ballots have to be received by 7 p.m. So we thought we would run through a couple specific questions that we get or issues that are sometimes presented to us. I'm sorry, there's a dog pawing at the room that we're in. And so let's start with student voting. College students generally can either keep their voter registration in the location where they lived prior to coming to school, or they can register in the location where they attend school. This choice is really up to the student. If the student believes that Colorado, assuming that they otherwise live out of state, but if the student believes that Colorado, or with respect to a Colorado resident, if they go to CSU, if they believe Larimer County is their principal residence at this time, even if they don't know whether it's permanent or not, then they can register to vote in Colorado, or if they're already a Colorado resident, they could change their registration to Larimer County. If they choose to keep their registration at their location before they came to school, they should be encouraged to contact their local election official where they used to live, or where they where they think their residence is, and arrange to have an absentee ballot or a mail ballot, whatever that state would otherwise do. Arrange to have that sent to them at school so that they can vote. If they are a Colorado resident, and let's say they used to live in Pueblo County, but they're going to school in Larimer County, they can actually go onto the Secretary's website, govotecolorado.com, and they can enter their Boulder address or their Fort Collins address if they're at CSU, in my example, and enter that as their mailing address. So their residential address would stay the same because that's what they think of as their residence in my hypothetical in Pueblo, but they want their ballot delivered to them at school, they can add a mailing address. So that's a pretty convenient way to do it if that's the decision they make about their residency. Voting by people previously incarcerated. I think I've said a little bit about this. The only people who have been involved in the criminal justice system in Colorado who cannot vote are people currently serving a sentence or on parole for a felony. If they are on probation, they can vote. If they have a criminal conviction and they've completed their sentence, including parole, they can vote. If they're in jail pre-trial, they can vote. If they're serving a sentence in jail for a misdemeanor, they can vote. So actually, it's a small group that cannot vote. And what happens is that if you meet those people in the course of your GOTV efforts or otherwise, if they have finished their sentence, including parole, they will need to re-register to vote. Because when they were convicted of a felony, the Department of Corrections sent their name to the Secretary of State and they were taken off the voting rolls. So there's no automatic reactivation of their registration, but they can register to vote up to and including on election day. So we're working on trying to make that re-registration more automatic, but that's on our wish list for the legislature. People who are homeless or without a fixed permanent home. You may have read something recently about the Secretary of State undertaking a sort of landmark initiative to register homeless people. Just because you're homeless doesn't mean you can't vote. And what you need in order to vote, to register, are two things. You have to have a physical address. The point of the physical address is so that the election official knows what form of ballot should I send you? Are you in House District 7 or House District 8 or that kind of thing? That home base, they call it, can be a park, it can be a campground, a vacant lot, a shelter, a business address. I could say my address is Civic Center Park, Denver, Colorado, in terms of my physical address. But what you also need is a mailing address. So if you used a shelter, for example, as your physical address, that shelter probably comes with a mailing address. The shelter is at whatever the address is, 29 something Stout Street or whatever the Stout Street clinic address is that I know is used by some. So if the physical location doesn't come with an address, then they have to provide one. It can be a post office box. It can be a parent's house. It can be a relative's house, a friend's house. It can be any number of wherever they can reliably get mail, because otherwise they're not going to get their ballot. But just by virtue of being homeless doesn't mean you're disenfranchised. So, and I just would say I applaud the Secretary of State for undertaking the initiative to focus on getting homeless people into the process. Voters with disabilities, they have a right to receive assistance when they're casting their ballot. It can be from an election judge or anyone of their choosing. they also have the right to vote independently. And it really is a fine line. You know, we've had instances where people with disabilities have felt like they were overwhelmed with help, and what they really wanted was just to vote by themselves. So it's a fine line that election judges, I think, try to walk to be helpful and useful, but not to be overpowering. All of the VSPCs are required to be accessible for people with disabilities. If in the course of your travels you come upon some that are not, we'd like to know that. And sometimes they're accessible one day but not the next day, because someone is parking in the handicapped spaces and they're not being saved for voters at the VSPC. Or they've decided to do a landscaping project and they dump the new peat moss in the middle of the path, thereby making it impossible for someone who uses a wheelchair or a walker, let alone those of us just who are able-bodied who would like to be able to walk on the path. So there's a lot of attention devoted to trying to be sure the places are accessible, but if you hear from people you're talking to that they're concerned about that, they should know that they are entitled to have assistance, to not have assistance, and if there's any issue, there's a way to address that with the county. Language assistance we talked about already. The mandatory locations are Castilla, Denver, and Rio Grande. Otherwise, you can always bring somebody to help with the language issues that a voter might have. That person will sign an affirmation that says, I didn't attempt to sway anybody's decision, but they are entitled to bring somebody to help. And a lot of times it ends up being a child or someone who has had the opportunity to become more familiar with English. Electioneering. There's no electioneering allowed within 100 feet of the voter service and polling center. Electioneering means putting up signs, handing out literature. The idea is to create a buffer zone in which people can peacefully and without being barraged cast their ballot if they want to vote in person or they want to go to a VSPC to do anything else. Some people wouldn't necessarily think that wearing a t-shirt or a button or having a sticker on something they're carrying with them into a polling place is electioneering, but falls within the definition of electioneering. So if you walk into a voter service center and you have a shirt on that says Hillary or Trump or yes on 71 or no on Prop 107 or whatever it might be, you will likely be approached by an election judge and asked to take your shirt off or turn it inside out. But it's not, that does count as electioneering. So it's not something that people can walk into a voter service and polling center and do. You can clearly have that shirt on if you walk up to a drop box, but you can't if you're going to be in the space where people are actually casting their votes in person. Okay, how you can help. I know that some of you have volunteers who have indicated that they would like to help out some way in the election protection effort and helping people. If you do, we are looking for volunteers to help with a voter service and polling center assessment survey that they would complete if they voted in person or dropped off their ballot. It's just a one-page survey and it has questions that they would answer about what's going on at the voter service and polling center that they're visiting at the time. So if anyone has that, if you come across people who are looking to help in some way, we'd be happy to have them as volunteers and they can get in touch with Caroline. And then as you go out and meet with people and talk to voters, we have some materials that we're happy to share with people. We have a sort of business card size. We have a business card size piece of material that has, it's sort of a know your rights card. It has information about sort of one-liners on what your rights are. And then it also, most importantly, has the hotline numbers on it so that people can always call the hotline. We also have half-page half sheets that are sort of, again, know your rights kind of materials that have both the website for Just Vote Colorado Election Protection and the hotlines on them. So these are some of the resources that would be available to you or to anybody that you talk with. GoVoteColorado.com. It's where you register to vote, where you send people to register to vote if they have a Colorado driver's license or ID. It's where they can look up their registration, update their registration, figure out the status of their ballot at any point in this process. JustVoteColorado.org is the website that Common Cause has and runs as part of our Just Vote program. You can find a voter service and polling center or a ballot drop-off location in any county. And there's a really handy voter FAQ tab at the top that runs through a lot of Q&As on things that might come up. And then we have these two hotlines. The 866-hour vote is the English hotline. We are answering it in person in Colorado, here in the Common Cause office, beginning on Monday the 17th. So I think that you would get totally reliable and accurate answers to your questions. It's not being answered out of state by someone who doesn't know Colorado law. So it's a pretty reliable way. If you have questions or if any of the people that you're talking to in the community have questions, we're happy to take those calls and to answer them. And that we will answer that also on November 7th and 8th it will answer it during the week between the 17th and November 7th. And then on November 7th and 8th, we will answer it at a call center, and we'll have 10 lines coming into the call center. So hopefully we'll have plenty of people if there's an overwhelming number of questions. And at that point, we will also be answering here in Colorado the 888 VE VOTA Spanish hotline. Until November 7th, the Spanish hotline is available 24 hours a day. It's answered by Naleo, and they would be able to answer questions about Colorado also. But both of those hotlines will be answered here in Colorado beginning the 17th for the English hotline, and otherwise on November 7th and 8th for both of them. So those are some resources that I think are useful. You can also always call the Common Cause office, and we're happy to answer questions. And I'm happy to take any questions that you all may have, either about things I covered or things I didn't cover, or if something I said wasn't clear in terms of how you would help a voter be able to register and cast their ballot. You all are good learners. Okay. Well, I'm going to assume that there aren't any questions. If you think of some and want to get them to me or to Caroline, that would be great. Otherwise, and here's our contact information. Caroline's, you can call the number that's there for Common Cause, 303-292-2163. That's the way to get anybody at Common Cause, myself or Caroline. And then the two hotline numbers and our website. So I think that there are a lot of resources that can help you answer voter questions. We're happy to answer any that come up and provide whatever support we can as you're out doing the civic engagement work that is so important to get people to participate. So thanks for attending the webinar. And if you come up with more any questions, just give us a holler. We're glad to help. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye. I'm done.